Hi guys, Freddy here, welcome back to the desktop for a retro RPG. And this week I'm going to start a series where I'm going to focus mainly on Dungeons & Dragons. You see, recently I started dungeon mastering Dungeons & Dragons again. I've started running a role-playing club at my local community centre for teenagers to get them into gaming, because obviously they have difficulty getting the books together and dice and somewhere to play. So I've organised that, and I'm dungeon mastering Dungeons & Dragons for them. And that's the first time I've done Dungeons & Dragons, or I've run a game of Dungeons & Dragons, since I was around 14 years old. You see, at that time, when I was but a bairn of 14 years old, I'd just started secondary school, high school to Americans and people elsewhere, and a guy in my class played Dungeons & Dragons, or rather, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And I'd picked up a magazine. Now I think it was a Magenta magazine, which was a role-playing magazine at the time, and in it had an adventure, which had a castle in it and the beautifully drawn maps of the castle and all the details of what's in the rooms and traps and things. And I was fascinated by this idea. It seemed so similar to the adventure games I played on the computers of the time, where you'd type go north, search chest, whatever. And I was really interested by this, and he invited me along, and me and Tim and two other boys, we played an Advanced Dungeons & Dragons adventure. I don't remember the name, whether it was pre-published or not. It was set in a haunted manor house that we searched. Now, the layout of it was very simplistic. It just seemed to be a hallway with doors off it, and then a hallway upstairs with doors off it, and then we found a secret staircase which led down to some caves and a ship underneath, which smugglers used. Very simplistic. I remember feeling like a genius at age 14 for discovering up a chimney there was a hidden compartment, because he described the room and the chimney just seemed to stand out. So I'm like, right, I stick my hand up the chimney and search, and I found this cache of gold pieces, and I felt like an absolute genius. And since then I've been hooked on role-playing games, I'll admit. But a couple of weeks after that ended, I borrowed the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook, and the Monster Manual. I think I also had the Fiend Folio that I borrowed, and I wrote an adventure. And within about 8 weeks of starting role-playing, I was dungeon mastering. Created simplistic adventure where people went into a city. I think I based it a lot on the Forest of Doom Fighting Fantasy game book, the plot of it and some encounters. I ripped off heavily even from that age. But I was dungeon mastering. But after that, it's been other games I've gone on to. I've games mastered Shadowrun. I've written a game that I've ran myself. I've done Call of Cthulhu, Star Wars, and many, many others over the years. Too many to remember. But Dungeons & Dragons is the most well-known role-playing game. In organising game for kids, I thought I'd go back to that. So I picked up the rule books again. I've played a bit of 5th edition, and I've been running it for the kids. Because my interest's been drawn back to Dungeons & Dragons, and over the years, because all the time while I was dungeon mastering other games, I was still playing in Dungeons & Dragons adventures. So I played a long campaign in 2nd edition AD&D. When 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons came out, I played a lot of that. I think I played some 3.5. Pretty much skipped over 4. I don't think it lasted beyond a few adventures. And I played in 2 different campaigns, and now dungeon mastering 5th edition. But for this video, because we're already almost 5 minutes in and I haven't shown you anything, I would like to introduce the very first thing I got for Dungeons & Dragons, the first thing I owned. And it was free, because it was this. The Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition preview by TSR. This was released into game shops to create the hype for the 2nd edition of the AD&D game. Obviously, there seems to be some hesitancy on gamers to pick up a new version of a game. I don't think other games had ever actually done editions. This was the first time that a game was getting released as a multiple edition. Dungeons and Dragons itself had come out in various boxes, but I don't think they'd really announced it as this replaces everything in the past. They just repackaged it slightly, rewritten it. Everything was still compatible. They just added on rules here and there, whereas this was a rewriting of the rules and a whole new edition. But let's start on the back cover. Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition Preview. In the spring of 1989, the role-playing world will be forever changed. The AD&D game system, the first and still most popular role-playing game in history, is about to release a new, updated and improved edition. In the pages of this free booklet, you'll learn the inside story on the changes, additions, reasons and methods of the revision. You'll hear from designers, editors and playtesters just what they were thinking as they took part in the 2nd edition project. You'll find the answers to all of your questions inside. TSR. And that's pretty much what it is. It's a booklet to let you know what's coming. There's a bunch of rules in here because they were bringing out a brand new edition. We open it up. And no printing on the inside cover. We've gone past those days already. So, we've got the table of contents, who was involved, written by David Cook, John Pickens, James M. Ward, and Steve Winter. Graphic design by Linda Back. Typeset by Carolyn Vanderbilt. Keylined by Stephanie Tabat. I don't know what keylined is. Perhaps should learn. Inside we've got an introduction, which isn't signed. Saying how proud they are of the first 10 years of Dungeons & Dragons. And then we go into what we've been doing. Why do a 2nd edition? Because, in truth, the AD&D rules are not perfect. They are and always have been very good. But how many times have you thought, this rule could be better, or they need to cover a rule to cover this situation? Where's that rule? Flip, flip, flip. I can't find it anywhere. Who decided there should be a 2nd edition? They say it came from their players. When did you work on the 2nd edition begin? Has it been a rush job? Well, they said that it started in about 1985, and they were talking about a revision from then after Unearthed Arcana. Playtesting. They talk about playing it with the RPGA. Who decided everything? Well, they've talked about having ran columns in Dragon magazine to get the opinion of actual players. New Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. They are talking about reorganising the books, restructuring them, who's doing it. We've got some nice art here. What's the most important part of restructuring? Well, they talk in this bit about how they jump between sections too much. So they've tried to organise it because, I believe it said on the previous page, that the original rule books were written in a stream of consciousness kind of way. The monstrous compendiums. Now, this was a bit different, because in the early versions, or the first version of D&D, AD&D rather, and the more recent ones, you get the monster manual, and then you get add-ons, so as I mentioned before, the Fiend Folio, etc. But their idea was to create the monstrous compendiums. So this would be multiple volumes, and they could forever keep adding to it. But they would come in these large folders, and you would buy extra pages and insert them. So you can stick them by Monstrous Compendium, or you can stick them in alphabetical order. So if you were getting Drow, you could add it after Dragon, if that came out in a different Monstrous Compendium. But we talk about how it's organised, how many there'll be coming out. Do they say? They've got a 3rd pack for the Forgotten Realms. How do they pick which monsters? Format restrictions, tough choices. What do you do with short descriptions? New monsters. Monsters more than a page. What's going to be in the 1st pack? And lots of wee illustrations showing what was in the monster manual. Well, I never got that, so in future weeks, while I'll be going over the 2nd edition Player's Handbook and DMG, I won't be going over the Monstrous Compendium, because I never bought it. Never games mastered it, never needed it. Big changes. So, we're talking about the ability scores, how they've changed, especially sort of strength. So, we have the strength up to 18, then the 18 percentile, and then beyond that. The weird thing about Dungeons & Dragons or AD&D was if you rolled an 18 for your strength and you're a fighter, you could roll percentile. So a fighter would be stronger than somebody with the same strength at 18. An 18 strength wizard would only have +1 to hit, +2 to damage, whereas 18-100 fighter would get +3 to hit, +6 to damage. But the problem was, if you were a 16 strength fighter, which is possible because you're rolling the dice, so you're not guaranteed to get 3 6s by any means, you're getting no bonus to hit, +1 damage. So not only have you rolled worse there, but the people who rolled 3 6s or managed to get 3 6s somehow, which seemed to be a remarkable amount of fighters, then got a second chance to roll and get even further ahead of you. So they didn't just get 2 points of a bonus, they got way more. Anyway, I'm off the subject. I'm talking about flaws in 2nd edition. Let's get off that, because we'll be here all night. Biggest change we make, character creation, was putting a limit of proliferation of character classes. So what character classes are there? Ranger is a warrior and a woodsman. Wizard, priest, rogue. So basically they're talking about breaking it down. So you've got warriors, which are fighters, paladins and rangers. Wizards, priests, and rogues, who are thieves and bards. Were bards in this edition? No, they weren't. What happened to the assassin, barbarian, cavalier, monk, and thief acrobat character classes? Well, they don't appear in 2nd edition. What classes remain the same? So conjurers, enchanters, diviners, invokers, necromancers, illusionists, transmuters, and abjurers. Anyway, I'm spending way too long going over every page of this. Character races about them, we've kept them. You've got multi-class and dual class. Basically, they're talking about the similarities, how Thaco's changed. Right, I probably should mention that to hit worked very differently in 1st and 2nd edition than it does in 3rd edition and later. Instead of it being a target number you went on, armor class would take... Having a poor armor class would add on to the target number, making the person easier to hit, whereas a good armor would take off from the target number, making them harder to hit. Because unlike every other dice roll where you're rolling high to succeed, in fighting you are trying to roll low. Okay, it makes no sense. Let's deal with that more when we come to 2nd edition. Optional rules in the combat system, changes in combat, has magic changed. Got a lot on how magic works. Experience points, spell descriptions. Non-weapon proficiencies were a big change, because in the first versions of Dungeons & Dragons, basically you hit and that was about it. Whereas they started to introduce non-weapon proficiencies, more commonly now known as skills. So wizards can be herbalists and navigators. Anybody can become a miner. Priests can become engineers. Warriors can get charioteering or tracking. What else we got here? Tracking bonuses, movement modifiers, new equipment, how armor class works. So leather armor gives you an armor class of 8, whereas full plate plus shield gives you an armor class of 0. So 8 adds to the target number, making you easier to hit. What does it add to the dice roll? I don't remember. Unusual metal armors, so you can get elven steel. You can get silver armor, shiny. Movement, anything new and different. Light sources, so how much a lantern will illuminate. Shifting gears. What's 2nd edition going to do to your campaign? Nothing except make it better. What about assassins? Got rid of assassins. What am I supposed to do with my Assassin's Guild? Suggests having mages, evil clerics, or fighters, making marvelous played killers. So my characters with classes that have changed or disappeared. What am I supposed to do? Well, just let them keep playing. Eventually those characters will be faded out. What about my old rule books? Well, they'll still work. What about modules and accessories? We've worked to make sure existing D&D modules and accessories remain compatible with 2nd edition. Yeah, the changes were minor. It was just a big organization change and the addition of a bunch of stuff, which of course was all optional. Starting D&D game, been told best way is to learn by playing a game. How can I do this if everyone is learning a new game? Well, learn along with them. That seems a stupid question. Suppose I get the second edition Player's Handbook. What do I do until the Dungeon Master Guide comes out 2 months later? Well, read it. Do you have to rush out and play straight away? And a nice picture at the end. And anyway, that's the preview. Now, I've spent 15 minutes going over to this, and I thought my videos were going to be a lot shorter going over the subject. But I suppose I've introduced a lot here. But I'll go over the versions of Dungeons & Dragons I've played briefly, and some of the source books for them, and talk about the history and that over the next few videos. Don't worry, I will then go back to obscure and strange games in my collection. It's just that my attention's been drawn to Dungeons & Dragons lately because I've started Dungeon Mastering again. I hope you don't mind this wee deviation where I just stick to one subject for a little while. But anyway, very many thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing, especially if over the next few weeks you want to see more Dungeons & Dragons content. But most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye.